Rightio. Morning, good morning. We'll get underway with this meeting of the Community and Services Committee. I'm Chair Councillor Ferg, just gone 10 o'clock. Good morning to fellow councillors. Nice to see you all again. Councillor Matthew Wong, Cody Tucker, Lisa Guy, Barry Bruce, and our Deputy Chair Esther Whitehead. Good morning to you all. To Ken Bailey, our General Manager of Community and Services. Good morning to you, Ken. Sarah Brady, our Governance Advisor. Nice to see you again, Sarah. To staff, nice to see you all again. Keep up the good work. And also to media that might be tuning into this at some point. Nice to have you interested. Right, we'll get to the first item, which is apologies, and no apologies have been received, so we'll throw a line through that. Declarations of conflict of interest for elected members. Do we have any conflict of interest at all? No. Thank you. Line through that. Matters lying on the table. There are no matters lying on the table. Public forum. We do not have a public forum. So we'll go over the page. Confirmation of the agenda. We do require a resolution here. The agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. Do we have a mover? Councillor Whitehead.
Can I make an amendment?
Yes.
It's a very simple one, but page 42 and 48, Michelle Morse is missing an S.
Typo.
Okay, turned into one of those. So you have to get that in. Gavin's not
Noted.
Yeah, that's true.
So moved by Esther. You want to second it as well, man?
I guess
Okay. Councillor Wong to second. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Community and Services Committee held on the 2nd of November last year. Gee, that sounds a long time ago, doesn't it? Right. That the minutes, the resolution required once again that the minutes of the 2nd of November 2023 Community and Services meeting be confirmed as a true and correct record. Do we have evidence? Councillor Tucker, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Wong, in favour? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Rightio, we get to agenda item number 1 of 3 that we've got in front of us this morning, which, if I can just read. Now, the purpose of this report is to recommend for adoption the Queenstown Lakes District Council Tree Policy 2023. A resolution is required that the Community and Services Committee, 1, note the contents of this report, and 2, recommend to Council that the Tree Policy 2023 Attachment A be adopted. And we'll just ask our staff to come to the table. Christine Skipworth, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to see you again. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this report before we open it up for any possible discussion or questions?
The report can be taken as read. I don't have our council arborist with me this morning, but I'll do my best to answer any questions. And of course, the tree policy has touch points across all of the parks team and wider council.
If I could just add, as chair of this committee, you know, since we've been moving down this avenue of the tree policy over a number of years, and the new councillors that have come on board, and I see now the importance of this document in light of what's going on within our communities here in the QLDC. So it's become I think it's become a very consistent document, which also allows us as elected members, along with staff, to massage as we see fit with what we learn and moving forward. I'd like to thank members of the committee who've been involved in that process, and Councillor Whitehead, I'd like to especially thank you for what you've brought to this tree policy over the period of time that you've been involved in council. So, any questions? Councillor Wong.
I'll start with a comment that I read in one of the submissions around slash and how that's being managed, and I noticed that it's not in the tree policy as such. I'm just wondering whether there needs to be something in there that aligns with any policy changes around slash, which I think was brought in November last year, or it might be earlier this year, whether that's the appropriate place to have it or not.
The tree policy doesn't apply to our forestry areas, and that's the areas where you are going to get slash. So that would come under a different area managing that. I think our maintenance teams do their best to clear any tree debris when they're doing their work.
Okay, but you basically saying the size and scale of it's possibly not needed.
Probably not needed within this policy for our day-to-day tree management.
Thank you.
Just through you, Chair, as Christine pointed out, councillor, it's within the parameters of the operations that this policy sets out, probably more for a better title, around the amenity values of the trees within our wider parks district. Your point you raise is obviously Slash is right at the forefront of a lot of people's mind given recent weather events. And the government's mandate that was part of that remit following the cyclone of last year did come into force from November, and it's been applied in a couple of sites, including Coronet Forest, as a live example, and also here up on the hill as part of our recovery program for that. But Christine's right in pointing out that we purposely stay clear of it from this tree policy because of that, the wider implications to specialised forestry sites.
Okay, thank you.
But it's certainly a part of an operational process we have been adopting in those dedicated areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've just got a few questions, mainly for anybody that might be watching today. I guess a few things just to note within the tree policy that for the public is that Wakakatahe and State Highway aligned trees on Wakakatahe aren't included, because that's something that comes up in the community quite a lot. Also that the Electricity Act comes above, sets precedent above this.
Yep.
So that we know that lines can be dangerous to trees, and therefore that act goes above this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So one question that I've got, well, also I guess just to say that thank you for the change in the tree policy. There's quite a lot to consider. I probably knew it better before than I do now, to be honest, but there's a few 152 significant trees in the policy, and we now are protecting significant trees. So there's a question that you may be able to answer around Ballarat Street stormwater proposal and a significant tree there. With regards to when we do works under the zone of the tree, and how do we protect trees? Are you able to speak to that? And if you can't, don't worry, because it is about one specific tree. But
that's where our tree works application form is required for all works, and it sets, if required, a tree protection management plan is put in place for any construction works around that, and that requires methodology for how they'll work around the tree, and oversight of an arborist during works if there's anything that's going to come into the root zone of the tree. That there's the diagram in the tree policy explaining that tree protection management zone around the tree.
So through you, Chair, just adding to Christine's point, it's one of the areas that through the journey of this evolution of policy, we put a lot of attention towards, as you recall, particularly with the CBD upgrade to Queenstown. And Christine's rightly pointed out that's the process, and it's been largely adopted, and we continue to actually make sure we educate but bring people along. Part of that responsibility would be on the applicant's requirement to also have a technical consulting arborist involved, so not strictly does it align just to parks, there is a responsibility on that party as well. So coming back to your question about that specific tree, clearly a notifiable landscape and a key part of our environment, so we would follow that process that has been well formulated and adjusted over the period of the trial that we did with the original updated policy setting.
Okay, so that explains it to me from a kind of arborist point of view. I guess the reason that I ask this is because if we lost a significant tree due to work that did damage the zone, the root zone, what happens in that scenario with regards to like negligence, or do we know what the ramifications are?
We do have policies for being able to recoup costs based on any damage to a tree, including anything that causes it to die or even just reduces its health or lifespan in some way, or any parts of the tree that are removed or damaged. I don't recall the policy numbers, but we can accrue those costs.
Okay, thank you.
And then Chair, just through you, councillor, adding to Christine's comments, if required, we've got the blunt tool of the 1977's Reserves Act. If it's malicious or through neglect, that they haven't actually complied with the process that was clearly set out and been adopted by council.
Yeah.
And you know, as you pointed out, we're talking about a finite number of trees that are actually across the wider landscape within the district.
Yeah.
So the team, as you know, through parts, take the guardianship of that very seriously, and we've really strengthened some of the work that we've got in this space to take this forward. But we would not hesitate to follow through on a prosecution if there was malicious damage.
Yeah, and that wasn't the intent of my question. It was more just that if mistakes were made
And they
unintentionally through
Yes.
major stormwater groundworks, that we could lose one of the most majestic, significant trees. And I'm not saying it to scaremonger, it's just to understand how the policy works.
The ramifications.
Yeah.
You're right. So we need to definitely be alongside and understand what they're looking to do in that space.
Probably a question that follows on a bit from that one, thinking along the same, about the same tree really. It talks about, so I'm just finding where the paragraph is, but I think it talks about viability, or like when would we make a decision not to? Like would it be financial viability, or would we have to choose another route around that tree? I'll find the paragraph, sorry. Where was that about? Only, sorry, 4.5, approved tree removal to carry out repairs or replace underground infrastructure only where all alternatives have been explored or are not viable. So I suppose what I'm saying is, if we felt there was where are the limits around viability? When do we actually abandon going anywhere near that tree and say it's worth spending X amount more to take an arterial that way or a stormwater pipe that way? How does that get weighed up?
I think it comes down to the public benefit of what a project might be achieving versus the tree, but I think trees and their value might be a little misunderstood, but there are tools to value trees in terms of dollar values and the benefits that they bring to the community. And once you've got things in dollar values, you can sort of be speaking the same language, and you can make quite good decisions in understanding the climate, social, cultural, historic value of that tree. Means that, yeah, maybe that project has to come up with a different solution. It's just not feasible. I think there is one policy, it sort of describes critical infrastructure as if the health and the well-being of the community are at risk from a tree. That's one thing that would be a factor as well in determining.
I suppose I was just kind of thinking from, if we've got really escalating project costs because of discovery and ground truthing, what's really going on with a significant tree, where does our decision making around whether it's still viable to put the infrastructure there, or do we go another way?
Ideally, with the tree policy, that kind of discovery phase is done really early on in the concept phase, so we don't get those kind of surprises as we go along. So yeah, potholing around the tree, all those explorations, mapping out those tree protection management zones, those are now requirements in our early concept stage.
So the lived experience that we've just had with our significant tree up here and significant works, were there any major learnings around that change this?
The Bracken Street.
Yes,
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm gesturing
Yeah.
generally to those that are watching online.
Right.
Up to the tree that's been worked around in the Lakeview.
Absolutely. The challenges through those projects is what resulted in us updating the tree policy to begin with in 22. yeah, we could see that there wasn't clear enough guidance on how to manage trees, especially around the construction and works elements. And I think this tree policy gives a lot more clarity to what's required.
So I suppose it tied back to me to paragraph 3.4, avoid works within the structural root zone unless there are exceptional circumstances. My question was, what do we deem exceptional circumstances? So putting that road through or that stormwater drain, that's exceptional circumstances. Will work that closely and manage that tree that carefully.
I think we do look at all our tree applications on a case-by-case basis, and we have this review of the tree policy has put more emphasis on significant trees, and it does explain our decision process with significant trees does come up to a council level. Thank you.
Just through you, Chair, just adding to your point too, which is some of the Councillor Whitehead's comments just around that particular tree and the learnings, as Christine's rightly pointed out. I'm not going to recover all the good points Christine's responded with in terms of your question, but certainly a lot of lessons. And actually the fact we're now having this conversation, one of the key aspects of where we've been with this journey is the education of our contractors and the wider fraternity. And what we have found is that the dial's moving, sometimes slowly, but certainly in others quicker, around the responsibility is to get onto that pre-planning rather than standing there, you know, we've got a digger ready to go. We now need to actually talk about what we're doing with the next piece of this infrastructure upgrade. We're well informed, often the case now, well informed about what needs to occur. And as Christine's rightly pointed out, the policy does give an escalation process too for something of that standing, that type of Luciana that you pointed out around what we need and who we need to inform, particularly given the public interest.
Councillor Bruce.
So thanks, Chair. Just a question regarding this. We've had a few examples of Monica people have planted trees on their road reserve in front of their property, and in some cases not really appropriate, and the roots can interfere with underground reticulation infrastructure and so forth. What is the situation where, and I know some of these trees have got quite big and mature, how do we deal with the removal or control of such plantings?
Again, case by case basis. I think if it's individuals planting trees on reserve, the policy states that they need a license to occupy. Granted, there's a lot of historical things out there, and something like a tree strategy could help with how we manage historical plantings that aren't in the right place. So that can be not just individuals, but developers who maybe haven't selected the right species for the right place. But individuals can approach us through the application for tree works form about specific cases.
Through you, Chair, Councillor, I can think of a number of examples in the Upper Clutha area, where we've had, you know, heaving of footpaths through tree roots, we've had people's crib walls, and as Christine's pointed out, we're pretty much bespoke with each owner around how we can do everything possible within an economic setting to retain the tree without the removal of, and I think we're not always, sometimes, you know, depending on what we're dealing with, but we are certainly, you know, trying to educate as many people about the importance of keeping the leafy suburb look around these hot times as we practically can. But certainly with infill of housing and the growth of some of the impressions that it's putting on some of the tree network within road reserves that might have been planted 40, 50 years ago, or even the right selection of what we're seeing in road reserve that's maturing from 15 to 20 years. It's certainly one of the challenges that we will have consistently going forward, and we deal with them on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks. Just probably it would be a help, I think, if we made people more aware that they do require permission to plant. Obviously, people take care and know their road fronts, and they take pride in it. And popping in some trees is seen as being a nice thing to do, and they get quite attached to those trees. But I think most people are unaware that there is a process and procedure to go through.
Councillor Whiting.
I really just wanted to acknowledge some of the submitters and in particular the Whakatū Wilding Conifer Control Group for their kind of additions and just noting that the policy has updated some of their recommendations.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any commentary around any of that, but you don't need to, but.
Yeah, Wildings was a little bit more ambiguous in the past version, but notes have been added around self-seeded Wildings, and we have incorporated all the feedback from the control group. Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, recent discussions just around the table in the last few minutes just reminded me of, I think one of the first, when I got first elected on the council, there was a high profile, Jenny, I think she might have been here then, an avenue of trees in Quail Rise that was pretty contentious. There was a number of trees to deal with, and I think it was one of my first call outs with the late Councillor Mel Gazzard, and we went out to try and deal with it. But I think back then there wasn't a tree policy as such, but it did become it involved a number of trees down this avenue, and it did become an amicable agreement. And I think the cutting of these trees down and then replanting it and seeing what's there now showed it was a good move. But it sort of, back then it seemed to work fine, but once again it was the issue of what's been planted before that was having an impact on footpaths and road verges, as well as Barry was just saying. Just reminded me. Any other discussion at all? Councillor Guy.
Thank you, through the chair. Sorry, I've just got another couple of questions and around the submissions, and it's great to see so much interest from our community and different groups having input to this. A few places we refer to addressing parts of the submissions through a tree strategy. Could you just clarify like how tree strategies work, how somebody would go about that if it was a submitter hearing that as a response to the query?
Yeah, a tree strategy is something that the Parks team would like to do in our program to look at how and where we're planting and what trees we're doing, and have some more data-driven goals to achieve as well in terms of climate change and fitting in with our other QLDC-wide climate documents and policies that we have. And that's where we would look in a lot more detail in terms of species, locations.
So that could capture, for example, Arrowtown, where we're so significantly socially, economically and environmentally invested in our tech tree community. That could capture all of that variety, colour, all of those different amenity values and social values within a tree strategy. Because that was linking back to Councillor Wong's question about slash. The Arrow River Track is an area where we get particular commentary around when the creek willows dropped, it's just left. Sometimes it's accessible for community firewood, sometimes it's challenging to access. Sometimes it will be on the Lynn's strip, not ours. So is that the sort of thing that is a, excuse me, perhaps as a community association involvement piece? I know that, you know, there's so many fantastic active groups there that are dealing with trees that count, or the Arrowtown Choppers or whatever it is. So what I'm hearing is a tree strategy could potentially bring all of that together for a community to address their specific.
Yeah, I think it would be district-wide and look at individual communities and their various characters that they have, and look at where we do have a lot of trees versus where we don't, help supporting different areas achieve their goals as well as climate goals.
Thank you. And probably I just had one last one. Oh, and it was again that, I suppose, recognising the significance. I had some feedback from our local Chinese community that there was some sadness that an ancient goji had been no doubt mistakenly removed from down around the Chinese village areas because we just don't have the awareness yet of what all our significant trees are, and a bush like that may not be easily identifiable. So it's great to see, and I see one of the submissions, it also talked about, well, we've got kauri in the garden, they're not indigenous to Otago. Obviously, they're very heartfelt tree members of our community. So I really encourage that sort of reaching out beyond just our native and sort of a little bit more understanding of why some of the exotics. That lady had gone down to collect and forage the goji as her ancestors had from being local Chinese, and was like, oh, someone's cut it down. So but again, I wouldn't know if I came across the goji. I wish I would. I wish I did. So, but thank you for those considerations and for picking up all those bits of the submissions that were noted as being able to be addressed through a strategy in the future.
Just through you, Chair, Councillor, as Christine outlined, and we're quite sincere about the feedback about how the community that had actually, submitted around that strategy. We can circulate to the committee a good example with the Melbourne Urban Forest.
Melbourne Urban Forest is there.
So it fundamentally is a strategy that we've often looked at as something aspirational. So part of their commitment, like ours as a district, as you'll be aware, we're only one of the 3 in the country with our tree palette commitment around the globe. We're one of 100. And rightly, as Christine and yourself pointed out, it's not just about one particular flavour. It's about making sure we continue to, have an autumn colour palette and all the rest of it, as well as our native weaving and everything that needs to go with it. But you can certainly circulate that to you as a committee. You understand what a potential strategy could shape up like.
Great. I think the Arizona community would be really interested.
Yep, the policy does support both exotics and natives, and through the policy we can ensure that replanting is done, and if people have suggestions about trees that they'd like to see, we're always open to hearing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Made good reading, and I put it through some of the filter tests I've been challenged by our community of over the beginning of our term. Trees are very passionate members of the Arizona village, and I could justify most of our thinking around it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussions?
Thank you.
Good comment, good discussions, and thank you for answering the questions, Christine. Rightio, the recommendation in front of us as a committee is that the Community and Services Committee note the contents of the report. Recommend to Council that the Tree Policy 2023 Attachment A be adopted. Do we have a mover? Councillor Brewster, seconder. Councillor Whitehead. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Item number 2. Relationships Manager, Arts and Events. Jan, are you joining us? Nice to see you again. Over to you. Anything you'd like to add to the report at all?
No, I'll take it as read. These reports are really quite straightforward, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions. The information I gather for the report comes through from the applicant sometimes and from Heritage NZ. So I'm not an expert in the heritage space, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions if there are.
Thank you. Of course, the committee's been asked to note the contents of the report and approve the Heritage Incentive Grant of $3,000 for reimbursement of professional advice for St Columba Church, 34 McDougall Street in Wanaka. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Whitehead.
So the whole pool of money for the Heritage Fund is 25k, is it? Was that, sorry, it does say it. Was that in the last long-term plan, or is that also approved for the next long-term plan? Do we know?
I'm not sure about the long-term plan, but it usually rolls over through the long-term plan. Yes.
Okay, cool, thank you. That's my only question, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, my question was a little bit in line with councillor Whitehead's. Thank you. I was just probably trying to understand the process side of it. So there's the pool. Is there an application round timeline where people, or do you just come somewhere along that year and put your application in? And these are what we've received so far.
Yeah, the application process is open at all times.
Right.
So you can, or someone could apply at any time, and it depends if there's any funding left in the budget.
In the pot. So there hasn't been a selection process to this is.
No, they come in quite ad hoc. Some, I think the most I've ever had was about 4 in 1 year. I've never used up the full budget. We do advertise it as something that people can apply for. There is capping on how much we can allocate. And so.
And does it also have to be like a category 2 or like a significant?
It has
heritage?
a listing, it has to have the listing, but there is a smaller pot at the end for significant that aren't listed, but are in our district plan identified. So there's still that flexibility.
It's really interesting to learn about the applicants' projects. So yeah, thank you.
Just through you, Chair, Councillor, just picking up on Jan's point, one of the things that's I guess seen as quite favourable within the heritage community is the ability to draw down on this when their projects get to that point, rather than finding that they're driven to be at a deadline for an application process is what we experience with other grant mechanisms. This is actually about making sure it's aligning to the project.
Enabling the time.
I think particularly within that volunteer space.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So I've just got one more question.
Yes.
So the funding comes from QLDC, but is it matched or anything by Heritage New Zealand or?
No,
No,
they don't
okay.
provide.
Right. Okay, thanks.
We are lucky enough to have like some Central Lakes Trust and Community Trust South that do support heritage programs and projects. So.
Okay.
Any further discussion, comment? No? Rightio. We've been asked to 1, note the contents of this report, and 2, approve the Heritage Incentive Grant of $3,000 for reimbursement of professional advice for St Columba Church, 34 McDougall Street, Wanaka. Do we have a mover? Councillor Wong, a seconder. Councillor Tucker, in favour? Okay. Opposed? Carried. And we'll stay with us. We'll go on to the third and final item on our agenda this morning. Once again, the purpose of this report is to review a request for a heritage incentive grant for reimbursement costs for professional advice for Luggett Flour Mill, 124-26 Main Road, Luggett. Once again, note the contents of the report and approve the grant of $3,000 for reimbursement. Anything to add to that one, Jan? No?
Not really.
Any questions? Councillor Bruce?
Just a comment, if I may, Chair.
Absolutely.
There is quite a bit of excitement in the local community about the changes that are happening there. The up include the transport yard where this old flour mill building is situated has now been relocated into a new base on Church Road. And so the old Luggett transport yard is being developed, or hopefully developed by the developer, into a community hub area and maybe with some retail or craft type activities. And the mill building is seen as the cornerstone, I guess, for the proposed redevelopment of the site. And it has a lot of history with it. There is uncertainty, I guess, in terms of the structure, but it will, if it is able to be restored, be a very good feature for any future development on that site. So the community are really looking forward to the changes there, and the developer is very enthusiastic about getting community input into the redevelopment of the site.
Fantastic. Thanks for passing that on. Any more comment? Councillor Whitehead?
I was just wondering about So with the Heritage Incentive Grant, we can use it obviously for advice rather than works.
Both. And
Okay.
for consent costs as well, because a heritage building, if you are doing someone kind of often requires resource consent, so we can assist with that
Okay.
also.
That's fine, thank you.
Well, just a comment, I mean, it's been fascinating actually reading some of the stuff and to echo what Barry's saying here. There's a lot of rich history, which I didn't even know about, and to be able to protect that in this way, and it's, from my perspective, it's quite a small amount for us to get this work carried on, and no, I completely agree with supporting these sorts of efforts.
Yeah, I'd just like to back that up, you know, you know, as much as town and the communities in our regions changing, you know, as we move on and expand, you know, these come before us from time to time. I've seen numerous in my time come through, and once again, as you're saying, Matt, yeah, it's a bit of a learning exercise sometimes. You know, it's great that we are still preserving stuff that is still important to our community. Rightio, no more discussion. Let's move to the resolution. 1, note the contents of the report. And 2, approve the Heritage Incentive Grant of $3,000 for reimbursement of professional advice for Luggett Flower Mill, 124-26 Main Road, Luggett. Do we have a mover? Councillor Bruce. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Guy. In favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Close the meeting 25 to 11. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff.